Oklahoma's schedule in 2020 wasn't really all that different from a normal schedule because the Big 12, they already all play each other. So it was really not much difference. We just didn't get any non-conference games last year. But let's take a look at the schedule this year and see who they will be playing in the non-conference. Of course, like I said, all the Big 12 teams play each other. It's just a matter of when and where they play. Let's look at this schedule here. 9-2 last year. They will open up with a tricky game on the road at Tulane on September 4th. That's an interesting game there. Tulane is a program that's been coming up a little bit in the American Conference. They're not a team that's going to pose much of a threat to Oklahoma, but still a game that you want to be prepared for. You don't want to just try to show up and win. You never know. But yeah, Sooners should be favored in that game. But again, interesting that they're going to play on the road at a decent group of 5 team to start off the season. Then after that, on September 11th, they'll play Western Carolina at home. That again will be a home game for them, their home opener, and a good game to try to build some momentum before a big one against Nebraska, and then the rest, and then they'll of course play the Big 12 schedule. But yeah, Nebraska is up next after that, September 18th at home. This could be a big game. You talk about Nebraska, and I know that they have struggled recently, but they're still one of the more talented teams in the Big Ten, or at least in the Big Ten West. They haven't really put it all together, but this is a team that made some improvements last year, especially defensively. They do return Adrian Martinez, and of course it's an old rivalry in the Big 12. Used to meet a lot in the Big 12 championship games, so I'm really looking forward to it just from that perspective. Oklahoma, though, clearly the better team, I think, going into this season, and they also again will have that game at home. Then after that, they will go into Big 12 conference play, opening up with West Virginia on September 25th. That is a pretty tough way to open up Big 12 play. West Virginia is going to be a pretty good team this year. We saw some signs of that last year. I think they're going to be a tough out. The game is at home for Oklahoma, though, so that'll work out pretty well, I think. And then they go into the month of October with a road game against Kansas State. Kansas State always seems to give Oklahoma trouble. They'll play them on the road this year. What is going to happen in that matchup? Skylar Thompson back at quarterback for Kansas State. If you're looking at the schedule for Oklahoma, and you see some games that, yeah, there's some tough games on the schedule for them. But if you're looking for a game to potentially be an upset game, an upset alert type game, this absolutely is it. Kansas State on the road right before playing Texas. That is going to be a very, very tricky matchup for the Sooners. Like I said, we've seen it many times with Oklahoma. Or with Kansas State, I should say, they've given Oklahoma trouble. And I think this one could be quite interesting there right before playing Texas. The schedule says at Texas here, but it's actually, it's of course at the Cotton Bowl neutral field. So I just accidentally copied that wrong down when I look at I get all the schedules off of fbsschedules.com. Great website for schedules. And again, when I just saw that, I copied it down as at and wasn't even thinking, but it is a neutral site game, of course. I guess technically Texas will be the home team this year, I guess. But this is, of course, a huge game. It usually means a lot in the Big 12. Texas, I know, loses Sam Ehlinger. They have some veterans gone, but they've got a lot of young talent. And with the rivalry and everything here, this is going to be a tough matchup for Oklahoma. And again, coming off of a road game against Kansas State, which could be kind of tricky. Tough back-to-back there. Kansas State and Texas back-to-back, and just early on in their Big 12 schedule. And then they'll play TCU on October 16th at home. We know what TCU is capable of. This is a pretty good team, pretty good program. They've got a lot of guys coming back, so that could be a tricky matchup as well. You look at the Big 12, and it seems like this is always the case with Oklahoma and the Big 12. You know, they're going to be favored in most of their games, but there are always games that could trip them up. There are quality teams in the Big 12. It's not, you don't get a bunch of top 10 teams in the Big 12, but you get quality teams almost every week. I know you've got your Kansas, but Kansas and maybe Texas Tech and Baylor might be down a little bit this year again. But overall, you've got to bring it in the Big 12. And that's what happened to Oklahoma last year. A couple of games got away from them because there are going to be teams that can challenge them every single week almost in the Big 12. But after TCU, they will play Kansas on the road, the one game that should be an easy win in the conference. Texas Tech on October the 30th. An interesting game there. Texas Tech is a team that you know is going to be getting better. I think they'll have a better team this year, but still I think they're a long ways away from being able to knock off Oklahoma. And then after that, they'll get a bye week. So an interesting spot for their bye week late in the year, first weekend of November. And it's not really before a big game, but they will get that bye week before going on the road to face Baylor. Baylor is another team that I think is still kind of working their way back up. So I think they should be able to handle Texas Tech and Baylor. Not too tough back-to-back there, especially when you have the bye week in between. Again, the schedule is really right there. Kansas State, really from West Virginia to TCU. Those 4 games in a row in the Big 12. It's going to be tough to come through all 4 of those games without a loss. And then you look at these final 2 games. Iowa State and Oklahoma State to close out the year. Iowa State at home, another team that has played Oklahoma tough. Iowa State's a legitimate top 10 team this year. When you talk about the Big 12, I think right now you're talking about Oklahoma and Iowa State. Those are the teams to beat. And this game could decide who finishes first in the regular season. Now, they could, of course, meet again in the postseason in the Big 12 championship game. But this will be a big one here. And if one of these teams does have a loss somewhere else and a team like Texas kind of sneaks up on everyone, this game could be a play-in game in the Big 12 championship. A loss here could keep you out. But they will be, that'll be a big game. That'll be a big game there November 20th. Maybe even a game day type game if both teams are sitting there with 1 loss or potentially undefeated. And then, of course, they'll close it out with Bedlam on November 27th on the road. Tough place to play, obviously. Oklahoma State, we're looking at them and trying to figure out just how good they're going to be. It's kind of tough to say right now, but they're always a quality team. Like I said, in the Big 12, you got a bunch of quality teams. So for Oklahoma, looking at this schedule, like I said, it's from West Virginia to TCU. Those 4 games. That's going to be really the first indicator of how good this team is. If they come through all 4 of those undefeated still, they're going to be in great shape. And then closing it out with Iowa State and rival Oklahoma State on the road, that's going to be the other stretch there. So from Kansas to Baylor, I think you get a little bit of a break. I don't think it's too rough starting the year off with Tulane, Western Carolina, and Nebraska. But overall, again, when you're talking about the Big 12, you're going to have a pretty tough schedule every year. It's not brutal by any means. It's definitely a schedule that could give Oklahoma a shot to make the college football playoff. But again, it's going to be a pretty tough schedule with challenges along the way.